Our topic for today is we're skipping to, or beginning with a new chapter 9, human sexuality, in our book, Theory and Practice of Universal Ethics, by Dr. Cowan. And I mean, obviously, it's a very, very big topic. You know, I think it's interesting in a lot of ways. It's a no-brainer. It's something we all have a sensitivity to. At the same time, it's also something we really don't. Meaning to say that, well, I mean, just generally in society today, many people have the view that sexual conduct is not really a moral issue, because you know, if you have as long as you have two consenting parties, then what's the problem? Why, you're not hurting anybody, the other person is interested, and so what's wrong with it? I mean, you know, it's like, do we have a very prude God who just makes people doesn't want people to enjoy their lives, and what's going on here? You know, so that, I mean, that's part of the, it's one of the issues we face. And when I'm saying that, I mean to say is that it's very deeply ingrained today that it's not very serious. It doesn't have the seriousness of obviously it doesn't have the seriousness of murder, but it doesn't even have the seriousness of theft to many, many people. And it's not enshrined in law anymore. So that's another sign that in society, it's just not something that's society's sensitive to. It's something that the community is outraged with. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that, interestingly enough, I think most people don't, despite that, still in their upbringing and in school, are brought up with a certain sense that there's something just not so, whether it's unclean or something lowly about being promiscuous, that there's something not dignified about behaving like that. Again, I'm talking now not in terms of Torah, but just in terms of our own experience, people's experiences as Americans. You know, it's nothing to do with religion per se, right at the moment. I'm just saying the way people just feel about it. They're just their instinctive sense of morality. That's what I'm talking about now. And that's what I'm saying is that from one perspective, I think that we're a lot less sensitive or lot less shocked by such behavior. On the other hand, I think there is something in us in the way people are brought up, or even in school, that there's still something, that there's something forbidden about it than the way people feel. There's certainly something, maybe a feeling that there's something maybe more very undignified about it, particularly for women. You know, and I think, again, also, this is, in other words, an idea, well, should I say the word, but what is it, slut? The word that people say? But in other words, I'm just talking about just the way people feel, the way, which historically must come from someplace. I mean, there's no question that it does. It come from previous generations that had very different attitudes. Now, in Judaism, the idea that there's this like specific emphasis on women's modesty over men's modesty doesn't exist. There's an equal amount of responsibility for both men and women to be modest. The idea that I think was common. I mean, not that I'm an expert, but in 19th century or in certain Christian societies, that men just were apes, and it was women's responsibility to kind of control a man's sexuality or to protect family purity, doesn't exist in Judaism. And the responsibility is on both parties to be modest, and to keep sexual unions within the marital unit. I mean, in best of circumstances, marriage should be something that happens at an early age. It's something also that very much conflicts with the way society now works. Is that, it takes a long time for people to get through school, it takes a long time for them to make a living, particularly takes a long time for them to make enough of a living to support a family. And that's very contrary, I think, to the way the Torah envisioned things. I also think it's very contrary to our natural inclination as human beings. It's kind of made a real mess of everything as young people are full of sexual desire. And basically, society is telling them, no, you shouldn't be married. So basically, there's a lot of promiscuity that ends up happening. People are not getting married and having children at that time when it's really the optimum time for doing so. Obviously, it also creates this, a very different view of what sexuality is. And if we take a step back about it, you just look at sexuality logically. I mean, I always say to myself, it's very interesting that somehow when it comes to sexuality, all of a sudden, all the Darwinian evolutionists disappear. Because what happened to all these people who are social Darwinists or who believe in evolution as somehow being related to the meaning of life? Well, tell me what exactly evolutionary is the purpose of sexuality outside of reproduction? I don't know, it's not like I've read all the books, but my point is simply what I'm trying to point out is on the one hand, society has this attitude of, this emphasis on the ideas underpinning evolution. On the other hand, the very act that represents reproduction, which is really what evolution is all about, the power of the fit, the idea of species reproducing at a better rate and more successfully than others, and yet basically saying that no, that's not what this act is for. This is for something else. On the other hand, there are different aspects of this, relation of physical relations other than just having children. Obviously, there are other aspects to it, very important aspects, in terms of the unification of the people involved, their intimacy, and what leads them to that intimacy, and what that intimacy is communicating to one person to the other. And also, obviously, the idea of the people becoming a couple and having an intimate emotional relationship between the two of them, and a physical relationship, and so on. There's so many things in a human being that are intertwined in human sexuality. It's very highly complicated. It's probably above a rabbi's pay grade to really fully understand all that. But it's a very deep thing, which I think also is the other side of it is clearly a very holy thing. And the point is, I mean, in the simplest of terms, the union of the two people are bringing down a human soul into the world. I mean, it's the greatest level of bringing in something, some sanctity, something holy, and also really to a great extent fulfilling God's will, which is to, bring holiness into the world, and also to bring more human, more images of God into the world, that they should fulfill their part and role in perfecting and refining this physical existence. So it's extremely, extremely important. And it's really, extremely part of God's will that we get engaged in that endeavor of bringing children into the world. And I think that there's certainly philosophically, there's an idea of just using that just for personal pleasure is a kind of a perversion of, that idea. I mean, you can look at it this way. There are mitzvahs, there are commandments we can enjoy. Some people really enjoy Torah study, for example. Torah study, in a certain sense, is also a form of quote unquote intercourse. I just mean intercourse in terms of the traditional old-time meaning of the word, which is that it's a communication relationship between two, meaning there's a union between the person and God. in Torah study, and it's often extremely sweet and enjoyable. And so there's an element of, within doing a good deed, we can feel some great enjoyment. And so in a certain sense, maybe that also is taking place here with the sexual union, is that there's a pleasure, but that really the true place for that is in the fact that it's fulfilling, Hashem's will, and bringing souls into the world, and also unifying two different aspects of the human, the male and the female, that are so different, and yet bringing them together and finding an intimate unity between those two. And those are also beautiful ideas. And so to pervert something that's really so special brings a person down very low. Or I should say, it's a great defilement of something that's very, very special. So there's so many aspects to this. I mean, if we get back to the root again, and the objective of Noahide is to make the world a settled place, forbidden sexual acts do the opposite, because they undermine human society. And this is really such a point that I find so interesting. Well, not just so interesting, but really the ignorance of I think in a lot of, and the kind of disingenuous attitude that modern society has about this behavior, is that, it doesn't hurt anyone. But we all know that isn't true. We all know that it does hurt people. It hurts not only the people who are involved, because emotionally it's not really healthy for them, but it hurts society as a whole because of the breakdown in the family that it causes. And then after people get married and they have this habit of being, into, having a lot of sexual excitement, there's a lot of infidelity that also develops because of, it's the idea that people that, I mean, it may work for some people to be, when people are younger, where they're promiscuous in school and then get married, and settle down. But my tendency is to believe that there is an aspect that you can't just change on a fly. You can't just change on a whim. And people at a young age are habituated to behave in that fashion for many, many years. And not everyone is like that. Actually, I mean, I'm not going to say that is everyone, but I think, or I'll put it, or I'll come at it from a different angle. If the assumptions in our society is that a sexual desire is something that should be entertained, and frustrating it is harmful to the person, again, that what happens is, in that case, is in a marriage, when sometimes things just don't go a person's way, because guess what? Things just don't always go every day the way we want them to, in terms of those matters, or many other matters. Many other of our wants and desires can't be met on a daily basis. We have to work with other people and their schedule or their life, and so on and so forth. And we have to we have to have humility and exert self-control. And if we don't do that, what happens is we end up breaking, or at least weakening, if not breaking down, our family unit, destroying children, because as we see, it weakens children terribly emotionally. I mean, we have now, in Western society, in the United States, an extremely high divorce rate. I don't know, was it 60% or more? In some communities, 70 to 80%. Divorce rate, and the children that are born out of wedlock or out of a two-family, it's just, the numbers are gigantic. I should have looked the statistics up, because it's extremely high. And there's no question in my mind that children are weaker as a result, emotionally. And they're also just weaker as a result that parents don't care enough about putting effort into their marriage. They don't care enough about putting effort into their children. It's also part of it. The point is that what we see about sexuality is not just true about sexuality, but it's true about other things, efforts that need to be put into family, children, caring about family, and particularly caring about children. I'm putting a lot of effort into children. In Jewish Orthodox society, particularly, there's an extreme emphasis on children. There's so much about the children and about, their schooling and having children and having, as many children as you can, whether financially, emotionally, people having a lot of children. And also, but just like life begins to revolve around children and their upbringing, and then their life events, their bar mitzvahs, and their circumcisions, their marriages. These are the happy events that people look forward to. So I think that's diminished a great deal, in other communities and other parts part of the society. And the idea, it's just common sense to think that this doesn't matter. It's so disingenuous. Is so, it's clearly just rationalization. It's only because people are lazy and selfish. People are just selfish, really. Just say the truth. Look, I just want to enjoy my own life. Leave me alone. Don't say things like, oh, it's just not good for the planet to have children. Oh, stop it. You just don't want any because you don't want to put the effort. It's too hard. You see what your parents had to go through. You see that they had difficulties. You see what it meant, financially, economically, emotionally, and the hard work. You just don't want to do it. Just say it. I'm lazy. I'm selfish. I don't want to have anyone else. I just want to take care of me. Say the truth. Stop the lying. Stop the pretend, idealization of, oh, it's for the planet. Yeah, sure. I don't believe any of it. I think we also have a problem with the fact that society as a whole is not helping marriage. It's not helping children. I think that fact that both adults in a couple family unit, mother and father, have to work in order to have what's come to be accepted in American society as a norm, meaning to have to own your home, have a car, and meaning to have middle class life, has become something that really, I don't know what it is in Texas, but as far as in the Northeast here, I think it's the same all over, but it's really impossible without both people working. And even then, I don't know if it's possible to particularly have more than maybe one child and to be able to afford it. That's by design. Meaning to say that it doesn't have to be that way, I don't think. I think that there are reasons why that's that way. And if the authorities and different institutions wanted things to be different in order to promote families, then things could be different. I'm not an economist, so I don't exactly, know exactly know how, but I don't call it an intuition, I guess. But I think things could be different. I think certainly we're kind of brought up believing that, or that there was a time in American history where things were different, and one person was able to work, and the other person was able to stay home with the children, and you were able to have, like I said, the house and car, etc. There's also changes in values in terms of what people need. My wife talks to me about this all the time. Used to be maybe that women didn't go out for a manicure, or there was a lot of things that people did at home. They just wasn't expected that you went out and bought these things that everyone expects today. People just did it at home, So why? Because it was on this, like I said, because the people had children and the money wasn't available, and people just, in other words, what I'm saying is that the priority has to be children first, and then have children first, ask questions later. Remember a story with, this is just such a common Orthodox Jewish value. But I remember my grandmother, may she rest in peace, was concerned about this topic, and I guess in the 30s and 40s, because they didn't have a lot of money. My father's father, was a machinist or a tradesman of some kind. I'm not even sure he started that yet, although I think he did. And so my grandmother sent a letter to her grandfather in Jerusalem, who had emigrated from Russia, Ukraine to Jerusalem, didn't come to the United States. And he gave her, and she asked him, she voiced her concerns about having children, be able to afford raising children and so on. And he told her the answer that, is very much the answer that, I also heard several times, in speeches from the Lubavitcher Rabbi, which is that is God's responsibility. You have to have faith. You have the children, and God will provide the funds. Have the children, he'll provide the funds. Don't worry about it. And that was his answer. He said, you have the children, and God, something will work out. Things will work out. I don't think that means that, you don't have to get a job or whatever, but the priority is to have the children, and then you have to figure out how you have the children, as opposed to, well, this is how much money I have. Do children fit into how much money I have? Obviously, the second approach is a lot easier on a person than the first approach. The first approach could bring a lot of struggling with it. Again, this is just such a ripple of so many different ways of and philosophically of how people think today, which, really I think is wrong. Just the idea itself, like it has to be balanced. Yes, we do have to have a peaceful life, but at the same time, children and the family life have to have a priority. We have to go backwards, and we also have to know that effort and struggle is a lot of what life's about. And it's funny because people struggle a lot for their job, and there's so much stress in jobs and this career and that career and corporate this and the next promotion. It's a lot of stress, and it's like, after it all, what did I get out of it? Like, what was it really about? One day, the person, after 120, person goes back into the ground. What did they leave in this world? How many years they worked for big pharma? It's really brainwashing. Person leaves, a family, they really leave like an eternity, like people who think in the same morals that they do, and there's like a continuity, particularly in a Jewish mystical understanding, is that, when a person has children and they continue to do the Torah and the commandments, the person continues to get merits from their activities in this world. Because, if they're following his teaching, his example, and his efforts, person may be not here, but he's still getting merits from the mitzvot of his children and grandchildren, and so on and so forth. That's incredible. But the point is that also, like I'm saying, the struggle that we put in for others, and obviously a person is, has to have time for themselves and has to have some downtime and everything like that. But nevertheless, pushing up the ante a little bit, towards giving, and that a person is a giver when they're in a marriage, when they have children, because it's not something they do for a few minutes and then they're back to themselves. It's 24/7. When you're married, the other person is in your life all the time. So you always have to think about somebody else, not just sometimes. And a lot of times, some of the biggest things you're doing in your life has to do with someone else. Yeah, and so it's a completely different metamorphosis. It changes a person then. On the other hand, casual sexual behavior is just the opposite. It's using when people have a need, they seek out another person as the object for their need and then disappear. So it's the exact opposite of a marriage. There's also deeper spiritual aspects, and that is that immorality and forbidden sexual unions bestialize the person, hedonize the person, and darken the person's, spirit, or hide the person's spirit, maybe I should say, where they become much, much less spiritual and disconnected from the spiritual and from the divine, and much more physical, like an animal. And if you look at Hasidic writings, there's so much of the way that the godly soul expresses himself is through the love and fear of God and thinking about Torah and the commandments. So when a person, gives into these things and inflames sexual desires and obsession, the person is constantly filled with thoughts and feelings and desires for forbidden behavior. So basically, their animal part is dominant all the time. It's a terrible curse. And that darkens and that's buries the soul under this weight of all that hedonism. It really distances a person from God. It's really the mirror opposite of closeness, and so it's extremely serious. And God, how do I say, in a metaphorically sense, or more so, God hates immorality. Bilam said that to the Midianites. How do we attack these people? He said, well, the God of these hates sexual immorality. So seduce them into sexual immorality, and he's going to punish them. So we see the seriousness of this area, and it's extremely serious. And it also says in our sages that someone who's careful in these things is called holy. Someone who distances themselves from such conduct is called holy. A person can't be spiritual and sexually is promiscuous and engage in forbidden sexual behavior at the same time. So yeah, but we have a serious problem in society, which again, the marriage is not being properly supported, I believe. And again, back to the idea from the beginning is that it's not a personal matter because it affects, in fact, it's the most, I would say, it's the most national and communal issue, even more than, even to at least to the same extent, if not more, I think more than financial dealings. Financial dealings is not how you got brought up. It's not who taught you. It's not, it's not who weaned you. It's not, not the first thing you learned when you were a baby. It's not who put your diapers on and your food. And, it comes much later. It has to do with economic prosperity. We don't have an organized and faithful system of laws in terms of business dealings, then things start to fall apart. In terms of economics, it's not good. But that's not the only thing. That's not the only thing that society needs. Society's social fabric also can't be just left to fall apart. And is that happening now? So the idea that these things are private is kind of, it seems nonsensical to me. It's not private because it affects everybody in the end. How do you regulate it? Well, this isn't really a political, this isn't a political podcast, so it's not for me to say. What it is for me to say is that in relation to Noahide law, as I said before, to have a settled society, forbidden sexual unions and the opposite of that, meaning proper sexual unions within a marriage, is extremely important that we have a stable society and a moral society and a healthy society. So most of it, to be healthy and stable, there should be stable units of family and extended family and communities. And I think you see that also, like, I'm sure there are other societies have, but in the Orthodox society, it's one really positive thing that you do see, like from a practical standpoint. Families, extended families, and it gives people a lot of stability, I think. And then, of course, communities. And it gives people a lot of stability, who I think outside that's lacking. On the other hand, it also creates a certain amount of rigidity or conformity. But we have to understand that you can't have everything. And a lot of times sacrifices have to be made. What's more important? But at the same time, we do have to also try to find the middle, meaning to say, give people a little bit more room for self-expression, but also there have to be some judgments and there has to be some understanding that there has to be some conformity.